Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Poantumilui, and I'm from Tiwi. So I wanna mean hello. So you can see up in the slide, Wurankuwu Community Master Plans are me as a chairman, me and my directors, and we work closely with Kieran, Wong and Kieran, doing the master plan. So it's about try building more houses at Wurankuwu. So as you can see, there's me over there, me and my directors. And we do a lot of work with Kieran and Kieran, preparing this master plan for the next generation to come. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Kieran.
You sure? You want to talk a bit more? No? Okay. Thanks. That was a bit quicker. Ron still got more slides, but we'll just skip through those quickly. So I just wanted to acknowledge and pay my respects to the Larrakia people, where we're meeting today, and to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the room today, and also to our clients for whom we are very grateful to work alongside. So I'm going to be talking about a project that we've been working on, or have completed actually, in the community of Wurankuwu, a homeland on the Tiwi Islands. Ron invited us in, oh thanks Nikki, hello, there we go, with the Poantumilui directors to work on Wurankuwu, a vision for the future. So these were some of, do you want to say?
So yeah, as you can see, there's me over there doing a bit of pointing out the direction where we're going to put more houses. So yeah, we've been working closely from day one until now. So yeah, it's going to keep up the good work.
So I'll just jump, and we can come back to if there's any questions, because we would be good to, if there's any questions, have a bit of time at the end. So the Wurankuwu Community-Led Vision and Master Plan project is a project that we were very lucky to be involved with. We're continuing a relationship on Tiwi with a couple of other communities that we're starting to work with this year, in Milakapiti and Pelingimpi on Melville, but we've spent the last couple of years working on Bathurst with Wurankuwu community and also with Wurankuwu, so with Poantumilui and with Mantupui clans. And the important piece of work here, I suppose, is that it is a community-led vision for Wurankuwu, and that the master planning process was led, as Ron said, and as you may have seen, by the community themselves. I'm from Fremantle, and so the constant talk of the Eagles in Wurankuwu is quite demoralising. I did have to push through that quite hard. The only thing that's really holding it together is the current ladder. So we won't talk about that too much. So this is Wurankuwu. It's about just over around 60 k's from Wurankuwu, heading west on Tiwi. It's what's considered a homeland. It's not a remote community, although the size and infrastructure in Wurankuwu is quite similar to many communities in which we work, actually. When we were brought into the project, there'd already been quite a bit of work that had happened prior to us that was led between Poantumilui, the Aboriginal Corporation, Tiwi Resources and the Office of Township Leasing, and that included upgrades and renovations on all the houses there were, and then development of essential service upgrades, designs for road upgrades, etc., and industry as well. In fact, you might want to talk about the prawn farm a bit later, but that's currently in progress and starting construction. So we had come in on the back of quite a few pieces of work that were occurring. And the key thing that really Poantumilui people, directors, told us, and when we spoke to in Wurankuwu, is that they really want to be sort of seen as a strong community, that Wurankuwu should grow, and that there was a sort of broader, more welcoming aspect to Wurankuwu. The 4 kind of key priorities that were talked about was ensuring that a better road could be accessed all year. So not necessarily a sealed road, but an all-weather road. Wurankuwu is cut off as a result of the condition of the road, which really limits its ability to operate at certain times of the year. As Ron said, more houses. This is always something that happens, conversation for us in every community we work in, or homeland, is more houses. But actually there are a number of good, well-constructed houses in the community, and there's actually space and infrastructure to support more, so that's a kind of an unusual circumstance. There is a small school in Wurankuwu, and so education was one of the key priorities for Wurankuwu, to try and also encourage, and this is something that's a sort of broader conversation in homelands in general, around like the next generation living on homelands, like what that looks like and how that would operate against the sort of the pull of some of the hubs and larger towns. And the 4th one was really around industry. And these are all themes that people have talked about. We're just in the Markathal presentation, very similar kinds of conversations and themes around the opportunity and homelands. So Wurankuwu itself is a beautiful community. It has quite substantial existing infrastructure, and quite a lot of this is being upgraded. What's interesting is when we start to do projects is we like to, I guess, compare where we are working with other places that we've worked or other communities of similar scales. I guess one of the key challenges in a lot of homelands and also in a lot of remote communities is that there's been, sorry that slide's a bit faint, but these are comparisons to sort of similar scaled communities in terms of number of community houses, population, etc. A lot of communities that we work in have historically been planned around fairly marginal land. Often there might have been a mission or a ration camp or a bore that potentially started a camp. And then over time, depending on the kind of pendulum swing of government policy, funding would arrive and then something else got built. And then often the things that got built close to the power station because it was cheaper to run power there. And over time, this kind of ad hoc and sort of opportunistic planning has meant that a lot of constraints and kind of poor planning outcomes have occurred. And in some communities, Yarralin is a great example where we've been working, you actually end up in a situation of kind of having boxed themselves in against the Wickham River as a result of trying to tie in to a gravity sewer system and a power station. So you're sort of faced with constantly trying to fund new infrastructure on the banks of a river which floods. So how to kind of jump across that divide is a lot of, I guess, the work that we try and do, in particular in the community master planning space. Often these conversations, when we start talking with people in community, start with discussions around housing. Housing is an interesting gateway into conversations around broader community infrastructure. People will have a strong opinion on housing. They may not have a strong opinion on gravity sewer systems or pump stations, but they would, in a sense, have a relationship to how that affects their ability to live, operate, function in a house. So for us, housing is a kind of an entry point, and is often the first thing that people want to talk to us about, and housing growth. And it wasn't different here. I think what's also interesting is that I'm not a planner, although we do a lot of community planning. But what's interesting is that there is an opportunity to think about the way in which, I guess, urban design or planning design, community design can be discussed and talked about in different contexts. In Wurankuwu, when we had conversations with Poantumilui, there was often this discussion around quieter parts of town and busier parts of town. And we found that a really interesting framing to think about well, what happens in quiet parts of town and what happens in the busy parts, you know, where children play or there's access to shops or whatever it might be. And how do we start to think about realigning some of the core pieces of community and social infrastructure towards these sort of ideas of, you know, what drives that, the conversation in the community. So these were kind of design drivers, you might say, and we started to work with, we often work with these kinds of drawings of trying to sort of describe what we think might or might not occur, how and things are located, and where best to sort of position certain elements. So was a bit of a, we'll just get to the master plan. We'll just get started. Do you want to say anything about any of those, that process?
No, it's all good.
Okay.
Everything is all coming up, which is good.
Yeah, okay. So the community master plan, I think I mentioned before, we were engaged by Tiwi Resources, which is the kind of umbrella organisation that sits over the top of the 8 landowning clans on Tiwi. It allowed us then to have an engagement sort of contracting vehicle then, and we received instruction from Poantumilui. So when we did the work in Wurankuwu, Mantupui were our instructing client. In Wurankuwu, Poantumilui are our instructing client. And that means that we get to sort of link up, and we're now starting Milakapiti and Palingimpi. We'll be able to link up these different community master plans under a sort of broader umbrella piece of work which we're doing across all of Tiwi. Again, similar to, you know, feels like same. We could have just given the same slides, changed the name. So there's a broader umbrella piece that sits on top of this work that is currently is a kind of live document that gets updated and kind of linked to these sort of individual discrete pieces of planning work. And the planning work itself was done with these sort of timeframes and implementation pathways. So each step is sort of, you know, within a certain lifespan. The intent of the Wurankuwu master plan is a 40-year plan. That's probably about the right amount of time to sort of pull off something like this. Things can happen quite fast, and so one of the reasons that the work that we often do feels sort of relevant and useful is that at any moment it feels like the pendulum could swing our way and we could grab that. Unfortunately, in my career, the pendulum has often swung in a certain way because of a tragedy or a crisis or a coronial inquest or something terrible that's happened that sort of suddenly throws some attention on something and generates money and interest from politicians. But it's useful to be ready for that moment. And we've had limited successes in other communities by being ready for that moment and speaking about it in a certain way that allows for that to be understood. I am a Wajala non-Indigenous man from Perth, and I can speak politician, and I can also speak English. And those are very useful skills to have, to be able to translate sometimes between those things. And often these sort of shorter and medium-term goals just take a little bit of political language, which is kind of nonsensical language in some places, but useful. So the short-term, the medium-term, and the long-term plan. I won't go through the detail of the plan, but there was a lot of discussion around what needs to happen once people are relocated and living back in Wurankuwu. What happens in terms of those first initial steps. There was some money for things like a ranger base to be established, but it was going to be established potentially not in the right spot, so could we do that in a way that could be relocated? Those sorts of conversations so that we don't end up tying ourselves in or binding Wurankuwu into a sort of locked-in approach to some of the infrastructure. And then there was a longer-term growth plan, which was sort of backed up by sort of an initial sort of set of concepts around what that might look like in the future, what that network might do. And these are useful sorts of, I guess, diagrams to understand potential infrastructure requirements, talk to people like engineers around load, sewer, all sorts of things, and capacity. But they're also kind of interesting because they start to provide opportunities to sort of focus people's attention on things like the store upgrade, for example. Again, there's a kind of pendulum swing at the moment that's happening around around stores and around food security. So how do we sort of take that opportunity a little bit with similar work that we've been doing in Yarralin on the new store there. Sometimes it comes along, and so you've got to be ready with a site and an opportunity to grasp it. So that is, in a sense, a little bit of the process of the master planning. It was endorsed by the Poantumilui directors last year in May. And so we're starting to work now on sort of pathways of how do we sort of tie this into a broader piece of work across Tiwi, but also as a kind of advocacy tool in terms of future infrastructure growth, in particular for the road. And I think I might leave it there, but we're very happy to, happy to answer questions. I'm happy to answer questions. If there's anyone that would like to talk a little bit about that, the process or the outcomes.
Go back.
Yeah?
Go back. As you can see, I keep telling my directors, without no plan, we'll go nowhere. So we need something to show to the minister, to Canberra, what we need. If we knock on Canberra door with no plan, we got nowhere to go. So I keep saying to my directors, let's have Kieran by our side and work together going forward. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. We're ahead of schedule, so happy to answer any questions. No? Oh, come on. How many people in Wurankuwu?
At the moment, we've got about four, 5 houses are allocated to the family. So say about 30 people living out there at the minute, till we get all the houses allocated to all the members or family going back home.
Yeah. Baseline will be about 70 people.
Yeah.
Yep, to start. That's what the sort of current housing mix will allow. Yeah. And the intent is it's capable at the moment of about 100 people. Yeah. Without much more infrastructure. Yeah. All right. Oh.
Government for the funding? You're going to become self-sufficient and supply your own funds through your economic developments that you're pursuing?
There is, it's this weird quirk, I suppose, where the housing that's there and the infrastructure that's there is commensurate to other communities, what sit within the 73 remote communities. And I guess the quality of the infrastructure really should allow for a kind of maintenance of that as a community. It's a kind of something, there's a line on an Excel spreadsheet somewhere that says this isn't one, right? And therefore it doesn't get this kind of level of funding. I think we all know that if homelands were funded of this scale, were funded in a certain way, it would enable a reduction in crowding as well as an improvement in economic and all sorts of other social activity in places like Wurankuwu, which are intensely crowded. So, and there's a series of people who are responsible really for this infrastructure, like the road is not really the responsibility of Poantumilui to deliver a road or to maintain a road. But the road is so essential to kind of leveraging that. So the short answer is there isn't enough money, in a sense, beyond the baseline. The Office of Township Leasing has supported Poantumilui to receive funds to upgrade the housing, fix up some parts of essential services, to also investigate what would need to be done to the road and the costs for that if they were to go to an all-weather road. But where the money comes from next, I'm not sure. Tom yesterday, Leeming said, you know, the policy door is open. We kind of want the wallet to be open next to the policy door. So I think both of those doors in concert being open would be useful. And there's a kind of strange calculation that's made to somehow describe where costs should be allocated, which you're all across. I don't need to explain any of this to you, but it does seem odd to me that, you know, people talk about the constraint of money when, in a sense, money's being spent in other parts of the communities, in health or justice or something else, that is as a result of this lack of connection and housing. So that's the argument ultimately, and we just have to wait for that pendulum to come back our way. I'm old enough to remember when it was the other way. All right, thank you very much.